so now that you can see me a little bit closer, I will show you that we always want to start off with our greenery first. It just kind of gets the shape of what your arrangement is going to be. If you can get that super stabilized, I always say that the greenery is the foundation of the arrangement. So let's go ahead and do that. The greenery that you're going to have in your box is going to be this willow eucalyptus. And so as you're working with it, if you kind of disturb the leaves a little bit and just slightly press on them, you can really smell the eucalyptus smell. It was just quite nice, and I really love eucalyptus because there's so many different varieties and so many different textures of it. It's one of the go-tos a lot of designers use just for that reason. Super nice. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm cutting off just little side pieces of it. This willow euc is very nice because it usually comes on a branch that has several stems on it. I think this stem probably had the most, and I'm just going to show you this one so you can see if you ever do get a piece of greens like this and you wonder, okay, well, how am I going to utilize this? You just need to take all of these laterals off. So you just would clip them where they meet the stem, the big part of the center stem, and then you utilize each one as one stem. So these are always great. They're like a bonus piece when you get this much because there's so many different ones that you can use. So I'm going to cut off about 3 different ones in different sizes. And then you clean the stem by taking off these very bottom leaves. And that's really when you're going to be able to smell the eucalyptus because you're shredding those leaves and you're kind of, those oils are coming out. So you guys should have a pair of these mini shears, and they're great for things like this where you're just clipping small stems. We do use bigger shears usually in design, but these are great for just at-home design. The bigger shears that you use are because you're starting to get into branch season, which will be coming up here pretty soon, where you're going to need to cut into things like curly willow that's really big, and cherry blossoms and dogwood and that kind of stuff. So a bigger pair of shears, you can invest in those if you're going to be cutting on branches or anything like that, but otherwise these are great for just home design. All right, so everything is going in at an angle. If you're watching how I put these in, you want to just let them kind of lie on the edge of the vase. So the lip of the vase, you're just letting them go in and drape over. And I always like to do like 3 different stems on one side, and then I flank it and go to the other side. And then that way you're starting to get a nice full piece all the way around the vessel that you're using. So let's clip another stem here. And then when you have really long stems like this, you want to really utilize it into 2 different pieces. You don't need it to be super long unless your arrangement is going to be really big. So I'm going to cut this and I'm going to make it into 2 different stems. And I do that a lot with a lot of my greenery. So this is a great piece. It's shorter. It can go in at an angle in the front of this because this is going to be the front of your arrangement and you want something nice draping down. So we got that piece, and now we're going to use the top part of the piece. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go the reverse and go behind and go back here. So if you keep doing that one side and then the other side and then the front and then the back, you'll end up with a nice array of different greens in here depending on what you're using, and then you'll be able to insert your flowers. So just a couple more here. Once we get our sides done, we want to get a couple in the middle. And so I go right down into the center where that center circle is in the chicken wire, and then just kind of let it lie like that. This will prop it up a little bit later when we're starting to insert the flowers, but for now it'll just kind of drip over for a second. All right, and then the next thing that you're going to want to do is utilize any thicker stems that you have, which is usually like a filler, or it might be a really big flower that has a very big stem. So the thing that we're going to use is this hot pink filler that came in your box, which is called Baronia with a B, like boy, so Baronia, and it has 2 different, usually 2 or 3 different stems to it. Some of them have just 2, but it's kind of the same idea as this willow euc, where you're going to cut the different laterals off and use it up in different pieces. So you're just going to make your own stems out of this one very large stem. So I would cut it kind of down here where it meets the middle stem. And then even at the bottom, where you have kind of this guy left, if there's some shoots that come off of the very bottom of the stem, you can use that. And that's a really good length right there that we want to keep. So we're going to use that to put right in the center of that chicken wire. And now it's going to kind of prop up that willow uke. And now we're starting to build out the middle of the arrangement a little bit. And now these stems are super nice. That was a very long stem of Boronia, but we don't need to have that length. So we're going to shred that, clean that stem, make it nice and clean so we can insert it into the vase and then cut it down. And don't be afraid to cut stuff down short. That's kind of the thing that I always see in workshops, that people are afraid to cut things down. And I think it's something to do with that you feel like you might be like hurting the flower, or maybe like it seems like a waste to cut it down so short. But one of the things in actuality, if you know about flowers and the way that they drink water, is that when you have the stems super short and they're almost kind of submerged in water, they actually do the best, because they're able to be, the stems are able to draw up water in a way that gets it straight up to the bloom. So the really tall, big arrangements that you see, they're quite impressive and nice, and I love making them. They're some of my favorite arrangements to make for like hotels and big events. But they actually don't last as long, because that water has to travel all the way up to get to that bloom to make it last. And so these shorter arrangements that you see that are a little bit more compact, they're really the ones that are going to last a lot longer, especially if you can keep up on keeping it full of water, since it is in a smaller container, and then changing the water every couple of days is really the way to make your arrangements last. So shorter stems, changing the water, keeping it full of water are the ways that this will last. So while I was talking, if you noticed, I was doing the same idea as the greens, as flanking these pieces of Boronia in here. So I would go one side, then the other side, then this side, then this side, and always in at a severe angle where they're kind of draping over the vase. All right. And then I had this one more piece, and I think it would be really nice if we prop that willow back up there and then kind of just angled this in. It's actually not going into the center of that grid anymore. It's going more onto a side piece over there, just so that it stays right there in the middle like that. So when I mean side piece, I mean one of the holes that's closer to the side of the vase here in that chicken wire. All right, and you can kind of just play around if you are looking at this and you kind of don't like the higher up things and you want just the flowers to be in the middle, you can do that. Don't be afraid to take things out. That's also another thing that I always see when I do workshops, that people feel like once they put it in that spot, it's set in stone, but that's not the case. What else are we doing now anyway? We're stuck inside. You just play with this all day if you'd like. But I usually like to do, a nice line around the vase and then some stuff in the middle. It always turns out pretty pleasing that way. So now we're ready for our flowers. I'll turn this way. You can kind of see where that side that I was working on. But we're aiming for this to be the front. All right, so move our scraps out of the way there. And now it's actually time to use the flowers. And the big rule that you want to do is using your big flowers, like your sunflowers first. I call these face flowers. So anything that has a big round kind of circular shape is a face flower. So a sunflower, a rose, a ranuncula, a anemone, poppies, anything like that is generally called a face flower in floral terminology. And anything that's more lateral and has little blooms all up and down the stems like these are called filler flowers. And then also there's a term accent flowers, and that would be something kind of like this straw flower that you see here that we'll be using here in a minute. A sweet pea, which is this that's in your kit, would also be an accent flower. And again, you see that is because it's like a very lateral up and down, and then it has blooms up and down. And so that's kind of a filler flower. Some are puffier than others. Some are just kind of these smaller, skinnier pieces of flowers of filler. So You want to start with the skinnier ones first, and then if you have a bigger filler flower, like this sweet pea, that goes in later, kind of as an accent at the end. All right, so everything that you're going to cut as far as your flower blooms go, you really want to cut at a severe angle, because that's the way that the water is going to be able to draw up and get to that top of that bloom. So just kind of take your shears and make an angle that's really nice like that. That's going to be the best for this sunflower. And then for these bigger flowers, I like to kind of keep them lower, closer to the lip of the vase. They don't have to hang quite straight down there, but the nice bigger shape is always better here at the bottom. So if you had like maybe a hydrangea that was really big, I would say to put that in first right here, and then we would put the sunflower above that. But as far as this kit that you have, I think the biggest face flower that we have in here is this sunflower, so we're going to use that first. It's a good rule to use, because then all of our smaller flowers are going to come up here. All right. And then now the next flower that we have that's a big, kind of a roundish shape, is this protea. And sometimes these proteas come in with no leaves, and sometimes they have a lot of leaves. This particular set that I got in had a lot of leaves, so I'm just going to take off these very bottom two. If your stem has a lot more down, go ahead and take those off and make a nice clean stem. But I like that foliage on there, and they don't tend to harm the protea very much. Some flowers have a lot of leaves on them, and the leaves actually need to be removed because they drink a lot of water and they take it from the bloom. But for protea purposes, that's not too bad of the case. Proteas generally, they're a very woody stem, so they last a long time. You can even take this out of the arrangement and let it does kind of shrivel up and dry, but it keeps the that nice orange color. And you could kind of just put that in a bud vase just by itself as a little dried flower and keep it for quite a while. It'll dry and keep that color for a long time, so you can keep it as long as you like. Now, we're not going to cut this quite as short because we want it taller. We want it in this container to be just a little, it's smaller than this face that we had, so we want it to be just a little taller than that face. And it's quite nice to have, because it's not a center flower and it has all these space between it that you can see. You can kind of utilize it as a flower and an accent flower at the same time. So like a focal and an accent. So you don't want to cut it too far down. I like to measure my stems and see where it's going to land as far as the vase. So I'll see, oh, that's quite tall, so maybe I need to take about 4 inches off of that. So we'll do that and we'll see where it goes. We'll cut it at a good angle. That's still pretty tall. I think maybe another 1/2 inch. And that looks like that's going to be good. So kind of use your container to measure so you can see where that stem is going to land once you get it in there. All right. So now we have this here. So where our focal's here, this is here. It might get propped up a little bit more once we start going, but I like it in that space right there. So you're going to want to try and keep it above some of the other flowers. Okay. All right, and then this that you got is dill, actually like real dill seeds that you would use to make pickles. And so you can probably smell it. If you touch the leaves at all, you can really start, that scent really start. So it's nice. I like really herby flowers. I plan to make some bouquets that are just all herbs. I do that quite a lot. And then maybe just like one focal flower will be in that. So if you're ever interested in any herb bouquets, let me know. I can get a lot of these special type of herbs, especially from local people. All right, so that stem's going to be pretty long. And so if you watched what I was doing, I cut the biggest piece down to about an 8-inch, and then it had a little tendril that was coming off that we're going to utilize. And it's a little bit, maybe a little bit taller than the 8-inch. It's about 9 to 10, and you want to leave that one long. It's smaller, and it's going to be a nice accent that's going to come out in this direction to kind of add a little bit of drama to it, because it's nice to have some stems that are kind of longer than any of your filler that you have. And then the other stem that's bigger, we're going to actually flank it, and it's going to be opposite this face flower here. It's going to go back here, and it's going to act as a big bloom on this other side. You don't really want to say a front and a back side, because all the way around you want flowers that are going to look nice. But it's going opposite and it's starting to build your arrangement. So you have this nice tendril, you have a nice flower here, you have a nice flower in the back, and then you have this kind of accent coming up here. And then there's this little guy. I like this little leaf here, so I just kind of cut that side piece off, and we're just going to utilize him as a little accent coming out here because that color is really nice against that eucalyptus there. Okay, so that's kind of all of our bigger pieces. We do have an anemone that's in this kit, so these are quite pretty. They almost look like poppies, but they are called anemones, like a sea anemone. And they come in like purple and pinks, a really beautiful white with a black center. Some of them have green centers. I really like that deep purple with these colors because it's nice and bright and cheery, and that's one of the reasons I put this floral recipe together for you guys, so that you'd have something super nice and bright in your homes right now, because we all need that mood changer, and flowers are definitely mood changers. It helps us humans to be around nature, and that's what flowers do. So it's something that we can bring inside and keep us plugged into nature when we can't always be out in it. All right, so our spray rose here, it's going to kind of be here in the middle. Spray roses are kind of funny because they have lots of faces, because they're little sweetheart roses that have lots of buds on this actual stem. And these will open up quite nicely. They're a little bit tight right now, but they'll all get bigger and bloom out. So it's almost that you use spray roses as another accent because it has multiple things on it. But then it also depends on how big it is, as far as how much space it's going to take up in the arrangement. So I always love to utilize spray roses kind of at that lip of that vase, and I'll pair it next to a solid face flower to kind of break up that texture, which is really good to break up texture in the flowers that you have beside each other. So you kind of have a big face texture, a little multi-texture, and then you have this nice protea where you can kind of see through it, and they're all different shapes and different textures. All right, and then you also have an Eryngium thistle. Thistles are great. They're really popular in the last few years. People seem to really love them a lot. I like the color. They're also great because you can dry these out as well. And some of the stems are quite big and have lots of different pieces. These were also pieces on here. You can take these different pieces and cut them off and make other little side pieces. So we're going to do that with this one. I had cut this one off, and I just gave it a clean cut right now. And I'm going to do that so that I can utilize this stem kind of all over. So I want a thistle back here, will be quite lovely. You can kind of see just in that section. And then here's another piece that was cut off of that same stem, and it can be utilized up here, maybe by that anemone. Just kind of at an angle. These can go in at an angle to the side if you like. Right there's good. That was quite a long stem, so that was a nice one to use at an angle on the side of the vase. And then here's even another one that's still got a long stem. If it has any leaves on it that are further down, you can remove those because you won't even see those anyway. And you don't want them to drink water from the bloom. I'm going to do that one opposite this way over here. So now we're kind of building a little bit out this direction too. And then here's a nice center part of this Eryngium thistle. And I feel like it would be great to utilize these two stems as a middle and then take this one off. So I'm going to cut one more leg off there and kind of give it just like a really nice angle cut. And I want to put it down here by this protea. And then this guy is a really thick stem, but I want to keep these two grouped together, and that staggering is great because it has the long piece and then the short piece that's going to give it a lot of different dimension to this arrangement. So then you want to give it a cut and then kind of do your measuring and see where it's going to go in this arrangement. That's pretty tall. I like the tallness of that though, so I'm only going to give it just barely another angle cut right before it goes into the water. And then it has a little knob there. I'm going to cut that off because if I have to move this out, that little knob would get hung on the other stems and end up being kind of a problem. So you want to always kind of take those little pieces off if you are working with a stem that has the little knots where different shoots were coming out. So I'm just going to put it directly right down in the middle here, and it's going to give it some nice texture. Just kind of move that anemone around just a little bit so that it's shooting out just right there. All right, so then the last thing that we have here that are considered face flowers are these ranunculus. And you should have a yellow and an orange one, and some of them have little tendrils on them. Those, you have to break them up so that otherwise you have to put the stem in and keep it quite long. So if you have one that has multiple tendrils on it, you want to cut all the different ones off. So you have one, you can cut this one off. And then that leaves this center stem as one nice stem that can be used together. And then it doesn't have to be, this is quite a long one. It doesn't have to be quite that long. Like I said, don't be afraid to cut things down. That actually is a lot better for them if you do. And then I want, this one's the heaviest stem, biggest stem, and I kind of need something here in this area. So we're going to put it back right here. And then this guy, I'm going to utilize over here to the side by the thistle and by that piece of deal. And then that one more that I had, we'll cut one more time before it goes into the water. It's always better to put a clean cut right before it goes into the water if you can. And we're going to let it hang out this way to keep building more of that section out over here. All right. So you can kind of see all the way around. There's some flowers on every little side. All right, and then you can take your next ranuncula that you have, and this one only has one tendril on it, so we're going to cut that. And then this guy, right at these, a lot of flowers will have these different joints on them, and you always want to cut them usually at those joints and kind of get rid of that piece, because that's where they shoot off into a weird angle, or it will kind of be cumbersome for you to try and put down inside the vase. If you try to cut below that and then stick it down in, it'll be very hard, especially once you have so many stems in, and you'll just get frustrated. So you want to just have a nice clean stem, short if you have to. It looks nice kind of down in the middle, to have like little ins and outs of your arrangement. Everything doesn't have to be the same height, otherwise there's no real depth to your arrangement, and that's what you're looking for, is different depths. All right, and so then we have this sweet pea, and I'm gonna spin this and see, I think this sweet pea would be great kind of right in here. So we're going to cut the sweet pea down. That's great, I love that guy there. And then straw flower. So this straw flower is really interesting because the straw flower it's almost like it's a dried flower, but as you can see on the green part, it's actually alive. But you can just take it out and dry it, and it looks exactly like this, whether it is dried or fresh. The stem will actually turn brown, and then that part looks dry. But the actual flower head is, you know, it always looks like it was a dried flower to begin with. I've used straw flower for many, many years, and I've always loved it. And it has really come back into popularity in the last 3 years, and I'm so happy about that because I've liked it for a long time, but now you're seeing I can have access to it more because more people are growing it, so I really like it. So that one had kind of a little knot there that I wanted to remove, and then again I'm going to do the same thing right here, right above that little joint that it had, and then remove that one, get these leaves off. And I like to follow the natural curve of some of my flowers that I have. Some of them will be straight up and down like this anemone. Some of them will have a curve. So you kind of want to use that. If I put this, you know, here in the middle, that would be okay, but it would you kind of can't see these guys. So I'm going to actually turn this and show you. I'm going to put it right in here because I want it to curve down on this side of the arrangement so you can actually see it when you're looking at that view, that angle of your arrangement. So then it goes in right here and you can kind of see it. Okay. All right, so now I'm happy with that side. If you look on each side, you can kind of see different flowers. This side has your spray rose and your big sunflower. Now, if you have more greens, this is the time to go ahead and cut more off. If you didn't use them all up in the beginning and you had a couple of pieces, you can just kind of fill in a little bit here. I want to leave kind of a longer one right here. Same thing back. And then maybe this shorter one, I'm going to spin. Kind of maybe needed a little bit more in the front there, if you can see that. And then that guy, move that anemone a little bit. All right, and then if you had the same thing with your Beronia, if there was a couple more legs on your Beronia and you didn't use them, you can go ahead and add some more in at this moment. All right. Right in there. So now you should have a finished arrangement, and from the beginning to the end you saw that we put everything in at an angle constantly through the whole thing, starting with your greens, and you do one side then the other, then the front, then the back, so that it makes it all the way around, a little bit in the middle, and then start with your biggest face flower, and then that was this and the protea. And then you had your anemone and your thistles and your dill, and the sweet pea is an accent flower, and we kind of ended there with our ranunculus as kind of a face accent flower, and then the straw flower at the end is another one of the kind of accent flowers that you can use unless it has a really big face, and then you can utilize it as a face. But at the end here, you should have an arrangement where you see everything kind of all the way around. There's a display of color everywhere. And it's just nice and filled out with greenery. And looks like I left a little ranuncula ditty there that we can use. Let's put it also over here, so you can kind of see where I put it right in there, because I feel like that's a nice spot where there wasn't anything except willow, uke, and Beronia. So that's like a nice little texture right there, and it might even kind of start opening up a little bit on its own, even though it's more of a bud and it'll never get really big because it was cut, but it's an awfully nice little accent. I love ranunculus, so it's a happy little spot right there. All right, so hopefully your arrangement looks something similar to this. You can always send me questions on my Instagram or my Facebook at any time, or you can comment on this video. I'm new to the YouTube videos, so hopefully I put it up correctly where you can comment, and you can always email me as well if you have any questions about anything that I said, or any angle that you think that you need to do. You can take pictures of your arrangements. I would love that, and you could use those on your comments and just like let me know how they did and how long they lasted for you. Just make sure you're trying to keep an eye on the water level and change the water. And I just really am super happy that even though we were all having to stay in our little close-knit quarters, that I can bring some brightness and something fun for everybody to do, because it's super important to have a good mindset during all of this whole thing. So I feel like these flowers will help, and I love them, and I love teaching you how to design your own beautiful stuff. So let me know, and thank you so much again for buying some flowers and having them in your home.